The Friday Sports Show with me, Jimmy Petruzzi. And today we've got an action-packed show for you lined up. We're going to be talking about the world of YouTubing and football, the fascinating world of YouTubing and football. We're going to cover the Premiership review and focus on the Manchester clubs and Salford clubs. We're going to look at the story of the week, the big story of the week. And we're also going to touch on all things sport. And also do feel free to drop us an email if you've got any sporting event going on in the Salford area. We'll give you a mention on the show. So we're going to start with a bit of introduction onto the world of YouTubing. And we have a special guest, Stunt Pegg. She unofficially covers all the YouTubing for Bolton, and she goes out there and does a number of games. And she's going to give us an insight into the world of covering games for YouTube, but also the fascinating concept of affordability in games and her experience of getting to games. And I think it's really good because it encourages young people, young girls to get into the game from a spectator point of view, getting involved in the game, because the perception of the game sometimes, certainly at the highest level, has gone to the point where, you know, we see the big stars on TV, and in a way they've kind of lost touch with that sort of reality in the sense that being a communal game. So Stunt Pegg, welcome to the show. Okay. Tell us about the world of a YouTuber. Now, you cover some of the Bolton games unofficially, but you get out there, and I've seen some of your videos. They're fantastic. And tell us a bit about the world. What do you do?
Thank you. Well, so I go to Bolton matches and I'll interview Bolton fans, and I'll create sort of a commentary as well as some match highlights for those matches too. And then I also attend as a neutral to matches, so matches like Celtic versus Rangers, matches in the FA Cup, just ones that I can create something and create a forum for people, you know, from the video. Fantastic.
And how's Bolton season going so far?
Well, I mean, delightful start in August, but in September it sort of, you know, slowed down a bit, reality kicked in, but, you know, we beat Derby last week, which is decent, so yeah, it's going really well at the moment, a lot better than a lot of fans expected.
And what was the euphoria like to stay up in the Championship last season? You went to that game and...
Wow, it was, you know, the best footballing moment of my life, and I think everyone in that ground's life. It was just incredible. The whole, just when it went in, everyone there, you know, you've got 20,000 strangers in there, but it felt like you knew every single person in that stadium at that point in time. It was amazing.
Fantastic. And are there any games this season that have been a highlight? Any games you sort of covered this season? And
first game of the season, Bolton versus West Brom. That was no one had us down for even having a chance in that. It was away as well. You know, West Brom just coming down from the Premier League, and we stunned them and won that match 2-1, and it was a last-minute goal too, which always makes it better.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating stuff. And you mentioned before you've covered other games too. Are there any other games that spring to mind?
Yeah, to begin with, what I do take pride in is I've done a few videos surrounding the price of football. And, you know, one of the reasons I started making videos in the first place is so that people who couldn't necessarily afford to get down themselves can experience not just the highlights of the game, but the fans, you know, the reactions and stuff, that atmosphere that's there. And a lot of people say it's the closest thing to actually being there as a YouTube video. And so, yeah, Wigan versus Man City, I went to that match earlier in the year, the FA Cup game, and I managed to get to that, transport, match day ticket, food, all that for less than £15. So that is definitely one that I take pride in. That's
really good going, because there is the issue of pricing, and it's debatable. I think certainly at the highest level, to take a family, and you can fully appreciate if someone takes their family to the game, it can be quite expensive by the time you've paid the tickets. There's also travel and food and many other things, that a match program and all the other things that accumulate. So certainly, in your experience, do you find that the prices vary in the different leagues? Or
yeah, it's interesting really, because there's some Premier League clubs that, like Manchester City for example, that offer great value, but there's some lower league clubs that don't necessarily offer that. So I'm not sure, you know, how they make their decisions and stuff, but I do know that there are a lot of teams that are charging way too much for tickets, especially around my age as well, sort of 18 years old age cap.
Yeah, you'd think that they'd want to encourage the younger people to go to games, that's for sure. And many people your age are at university and they're studying as well. So I think that would be definitely something for them to take in consideration. I don't know what the business model is, but I have heard on situations where a lot of the bigger clubs at least make a majority of their revenue through TV and through obviously merchandise and so on and so forth. But you can imagine for a family it can be quite an expensive business, because let's say you took 2 children and the dad wants to take, or the mum wants to take 2 children, they went as a family, and then you've got the shirts and they release shirts a little bit more regular than they used to before. So you can see it can be an expensive business, and a season ticket. And do you yourself have a season ticket for your games? Or
Yeah, I've had a season ticket for a few years now, and it's always been really good value at Bolton for under 18s. It's been 75, 85 quid, which that's brilliant. But what's interesting is next year my season ticket, because I'll be in the 18s and overs price bracket, it goes up from around the sort of 75, 85 pound mark to 300 quid. So there's a huge I just feel like there should be more of a stage in it. So once you get to sort of like 18, 19, 20, 21, when you're still in full-time education, if you're at uni or apprenticeships and stuff, you should really be gradually building that up. And I don't see why you should have to spend that much money straight away when you're not really earning an income still at 18 years old, are you?
Well, it definitely might be something you can write to the clubs and see what they say. And have you written to any clubs?
I've not written to the clubs, but I have spoken. I've spoken to, I know the chairman, the son of the chairman at Bolton. I've spoken to him about ticket pricing. I've spoken on the radio, like indirectly to them, and they've listened as well through that. So I do hope they are paying attention to that.
Well, I'm sure they certainly would at least take it in consideration. Now we're going to move on to the Premiership review, and we start the review with Brighton versus West Ham. Now Brighton, it's interesting form. They've lost the last 4, and it's a tricky one, this one here, Brighton-West Ham, because West Ham have picked up some points as of recent. After a tough start, they've won 3 of their last games, and the big game against Man United, they won 3-1 there. And Brighton, if memory serves me correctly, had beaten West Ham last year twice. It looks like Dale Stephens, who is back in contention to play for him this evening. Now, what are your thoughts on Brighton and West Ham? Why do you see the money on there?
Well, both interesting clubs really, because especially Brighton, they haven't got the results, but the football they've been playing has been decent, and they've been limiting teams like Man City, Liverpool, Tottenham to only small wins. So they've not got the points, but the football's there.
That's a great point. I mean, they're without a win in all competitions, losing 4 and drawing 2 in the last 6 games, but they have faced Liverpool, City and Tottenham, so they did put in a decent performance by all accounts against Tottenham last week. So I'm going to go for a draw as well. I think that Brighton at home will put up a good fight, and West Ham, in all fairness, they've sort of bounced back after a tough start, and they're playing some good football too. Crystal Palace as well versus Wolves. Now that's an interesting game because Palace have not scored at home this season, and they've been missing Benteke, albeit Benteke, in all fairness, it'd probably be the first to admit, hasn't set the world on fire at Palace. Wolves are unbeaten in 5 matches. They're in the top half, and having gone to watch Wolves last season, for me, watching them last season, they looked like a premiership team. They a lot of quality in the team, and it's no surprise they're doing well. I think the fans had expectations for them to do well. I'm pretty sure that the manager there has expectations. I see that as a draw. I think Crystal Palace at home, I think Hodgson will set them up to be hard to break down, and I see it as going 1-1. What's your thoughts on that?
I think Wolves are going to nick that 1-1 nil. I think that's because it took them a while. It took them a few games, but Wolves are really adjusted now, and I think they will become an established top half team by the end of the season. And I just think Crystal Palace, they don't seem to have it. There's a lot of between Roy Hodgson and the players and stuff. I can't see where they're going to get a goal from in that match.
That's a really good point. I echo your sentiments in that extent. I mean, their goal scoring record is quite poor at the moment, and they've got to find a goal from somewhere.
And I noticed that Roy Hodgson had said after a match that he'd sort of put a lot of the blame on Wilfried Zaha, and I didn't think he went about that the right way. I don't think that would sit well with your players if you do that. So yeah,
that's a good point. Certainly my involvement in the game, I certainly think that once any sort of criticism of players, but then in saying that everybody's different, and no doubt every situation is unique on its own. Tottenham Cardiff is an interesting game. Tottenham, by all accounts, are going to be without Eriksen, Ali, Dembele. They played Barcelona during the week as well. It was an interesting game. They showed some fighting quality. I mean, the irony is really, they're playing at home at Wembley, and I think a team like Barcelona goes to Wembley. I think in a way it could work in the reverse, in the sense that you're at Wembley, traditional, and in a way, I wouldn't say it's a hindrance, but yet, is it really a home advantage? But that's another story for another day. Cardiff's been really struggling to adapt to life in the Premiership. I think they've really struggled this season so far, but they're putting on a brave face there. I think Tottenham will win and win comfortably 3-0.
Yeah, I'd say I'm going to go 2-0 for that one. I think the problem with Cardiff, the reason why they're really struggling is because if you look at that squad and the manager, they haven't really got anyone in the Premier League that's established yet. They're all very good Championship players, but like they signed Bobby Reid, who's Bristol City. He was brilliant for Bristol City, but he's never proved himself in the Premier League. So I just think they just haven't got that experience in the team, and I think they'll lose 2-0.
That's an interesting take. Yeah, it's tough. The Premiership is tough. It's not an easy league to play in, that's for sure. And I think what's your take on the gulf between the Championship and the Premiership? It's the top. It depends which part. For me, I think there's a gulf just as big between the top half of the Championship and the bottom half of the Championship, because it's the money. There's a lot more money coming into it. Middlesbrough, I think, could survive in the Premier League if you put them in it now, whereas someone like my team Bolton, I don't think we would stand a chance. I think there's a massive difference between Bolton and Middlesbrough, for example, just like there is between Bolton and the Premier League team. So I think it's getting smaller, that gulf between the Premier League and the Championship. Yeah, with the money coming in. Yeah, I think with the exception of the top 4 or 5 teams, that's for sure. Certainly, I think that you take, say, the likes of Chelsea, City, United, Arsenal, Tottenham, even. I think they've got their own little mini league on its own, and aside from that, obviously, it's the disparity isn't great. We see teams like Leicester and Everton and knocking the periphery and Burnley last year as well. So I certainly agree with that point. It's an interesting point you make there. Now we go to Southampton versus Chelsea. This is an interesting one. Chelsea are third. They played in Europa League. Hazard, Jorginho, Kante back in contention in the squad. Southampton, they had a win against Fulham in the Carabao Cup on penalties. That should give them a little bit of confidence if we're sort of going to clutch at straws. The only thing I would say for Southampton, they haven't scored. They haven't had a result at home since November, I believe, last year. It's a long time, albeit last year, ironically, against Chelsea, they're winning 2-0 and lost 3-2 in the April fixture. I think Sarri's adapting to the Premier League pretty well. He seems to be taking the Premier League, but he probably hasn't been tested as yet, albeit Liverpool was a test last week. I think Chelsea will be too strong. I'm going to go for 3-0. Yeah, I think you made a good point there, because Sarri, they were scoring goals, Chelsea, but they were also conceding quite a few goals at the start of the season. But Liverpool was proof that he's adapting to it. Yeah, no, definitely. And it's always interesting, really, because certainly at Napoli, he played a really expansive game of football, and which can concede you goals, but Napoli, Chelsea now, I think will just outscore a lot of teams, and I think they'll do that with Southampton. I think it'll be maybe like a 3-2. Yeah, no, interesting game, and certainly for me, the Kante and Jorginho combination has been phenomenal, and having watched Napoli last season, Sarri's Napoli on a few occasions, the style of football he plays is just incredible, and he's had a lot of praise of a lot of managers, that's for sure, and he's certainly adapted really quick to the Premier League. But it's a long season, and you can only start well and obviously beat what's in front of you, but I certainly think that they'll be too strong for Southampton, that's for sure.
Your local community radio station, Salford City Radio. .4 FM, and it's Jimmy Petruzzi bringing you home, if you're not already home, with the Friday Sports Show. And we're covering the Premiership. So we're going to move on to Leicester versus Everton. Leicester looking to make it 3 wins in a row. They're hosting Everton. They've beaten Huddersfield, Newcastle. They're playing some good stuff now. They're 8th in the table. And big news. The big news is James Maddison, first England call-up. Squad against Croatia and Spain. What are your thoughts on that, Stunt Pegg?
James Maddison, well, I think it's, I'm so happy for him because he used to play for Norwich, and me being a big Championship fan, I saw him last year and he was unreal. He used to win matches when they weren't that great as a team. He used to win the matches, so he's brilliant. So I'm so glad he's got himself a call up.
Fantastic. And Everton's had an indifferent start to the season. It's been an interesting start. Their season hasn't really got going, but they're up there. The irony is they're up there, and I think for me, Leicester at home, I'm going to go Leicester 2-1.
I'm going to disagree with you and say 2-1 to Everton on that one.
Mm-hmm. Any specific reason why?
Well, I think Sigurdsson, he put a really good performance in the last match. I watched that, and also Richarlison as well, and I just think they'll have just a bit too much quality for Leicester in that game.
Okay. Burnley v Huddersfield. Burnley have catapulted themselves back to the mid-table. They had a bit of a tricky start this season. I think the expectation there, they made the Europa last year. They had a great season last year. The manager died. Probably unlucky not to get manager of the year last year, at least in my opinion. Anyway, they're looking for another winner. I think it's the first straight win in a row. Huddersfield has spent a little bit of money in the off-season. They spent a bit of money, and last season I think that, at least for the first part of the season, they took the season by storm and they managed to stay up. The only problem with Huddersfield, they struggle to score. 3 goals in 7 matches is not a good sign. I'm going to go for Burnley 2-0. I just don't know where the goals are going to come from for Huddersfield at the moment. So
I completely agree. I can't see Huddersfield scoring. And I think Sean Dyche said himself that Burnley, they've sort of got over from that hangover from European football now. So I think they'll get back into it now, Burnley, and the fans shouldn't be too worried with that. I agree.
And Watford-Bournemouth, that's going to be a fascinating one too. Watford had a flying start this season. They were flying and they really, really took the league by storm, playing some good football. Last week they took back down to earth. They've lost 3 in a row. That's the premiership for you, where you can go on a run, but equally you can go on a run where you start losing. It's hard to get your next points. And I thought last week they played some good football against Arsenal. They're unlucky, I felt, not to get a point out of the game at least. But that's football. You can play badly and win. You can play really well and not get a result. Bournemouth, they've quietly gone along nicely. They, apart from that blip against Burn at 4-0, they look a decent side there. I'm going to go for Watford, I think, back to winning ways, 1-0.
Yeah, I'm going to go 2-2 on that one. I think I can see Callum Wilson getting a goal in that for Bournemouth. He's been a real talent so far. And I think Watford, they just can't afford not to get at least a point, because it'll start to become a habit, I think, for them, to deserve points but not get them if they don't. So, 2-1.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think that's the trouble in the Premier League, and you lose one and one becomes 2-3, but equally you win one becomes 2-3, and there's that sort of in the league where you could win 2 or 3 in a row and push up to the league, or you could lose a couple and find yourself fighting relegation. That's the sort of league. Fulham Arsenal's going to be interesting game 2, I think, and Arsenal are flying at the moment. They won 3-0 in the Europa League during the week. They're 8 straight wins in all competitions. I'm a bit surprised, I must admit, with Fulham, and I know Fulham's a team you saw last year in the Championship. I'm a bit surprised they're struggling at the moment. I thought they were well geared up for the Premier League, and I know it's early days, but they are struggling. I think Arsenal, the London derby, are going to be too strong. I'm going to go for Arsenal 2-0.
I'm going to blow it out of the park and say that I think Arsenal will win that one 4-1, because I said it before the season started that I thought Fulham would be relegated. So, I'm not saying it's way too early to tell that yet, but for me, I think with Fulham, they spent, so much money, over £100 million, and they sort of bought like £10 million players and stuff, and they just don't seem to have gelled together. And what I don't understand is, for example, they've got Callum Chambers from Arsenal on loan, and he's a centre-back, and they've already got a defender called Tim Ream, who I think's brilliant, and they went for Callum Chambers, but realistically, are Arsenal going to loan a player to another London club who they thought would be worth keeping? So I just think they've made a couple of silly decisions in the transfer market, so I think they'll really struggle defensively.
That's interesting stuff. And we go to Liverpool versus Man City. What a game that's in prospect. Yeah, and start of the season, we know that Liverpool were tipped to push City all the way. In all fairness, City last season ran away with it. They were too strong. Albeit last season, I thought there were pivotal games where it could have gone the other way. But that's a sign of a Champions team. That's a sign of a winning team. When the old United used to do it,
where they wouldn't always play great, but they'd always find the way to win. And last season, I felt City always found the way to win. And certainly in the games I went to go watch them play, they played some fantastic football at times too. They've got a lot of attacking options. This season, I don't think they have hit the ground running as yet. There's a lot more in the tank. I'm not entirely convinced at the moment that Liverpool can go the distance in the Premiership and mount a serious challenge. When I say serious challenge, I don't think that Liverpool can haul those points back. I do think that they can, like they did last season in the Champions League, in a one-off, get a result. And I can see Liverpool getting a result tomorrow. They're at home. They need to get back to winning ways. They haven't won for 3 games. I can see Liverpool tomorrow nicking a win 2-1.
I think that Manchester City will win that one. I mean, I think I'm not sure yet if he will come back, but regardless of it, De Bruyne. But for me, there's a bit more consistency right now with Manchester City, and Pep Guardiola's learnt from previous mistakes from Anfield, and I think it's going to be the other way around, and I think it's going to be a 2-1 victory to Man City, that one.
Do you think that if they do win, it's going to be, I know it's early days and we can't, the title's not decided in October, but I think it's going to be a psychological blow to Liverpool if they get beat. I just think that.
Certainly, especially with them, last 3 games, they haven't won a game. And if they're not all league matches, but it doesn't matter. If you want to win and you want to win the title, then you've got to keep winning. You've got to keep getting results. And not winning in 3 games, 2 of them losing the matches too, that doesn't sound like a Premier League champion team, the champions of England to me.
No, I agree entirely. And I think winning's a habit. I certainly can't understand why teams rest players. I understand the philosophy behind it, but I think when you're winning, you keep playing your best team. And I know that sports science is a big thing in sport these days, specifically football. And having been in the game myself, I fully appreciate that there are times that certain players, they go in what we call the red zone. They need a rest. But I think winning's habitual. And I certainly think that regardless of what competition you're playing, once you lose, it sort of goes into the psyche of the players and the club. And you're only 1 win away from going on a run and 1 loss away from going on a run too. And I really think that even this early, if City beat Liverpool, it's going to cause a psychological blow.
Especially at Anfield.
I think so, because then you start getting a bit of daylight between the two. And you know what football's like. You lose another one, and I think there's a lot of pressure on Liverpool. They've been given a lot of praise this season, and rightly so. But I think there's a bit of extra pressure on this game. And the game against Napoli, I thought they were lacklustre. They didn't have a shot on goal. Definitely. And they looked a bit leggy, a bit lethargic, albeit, as you well know, you've been to the Sao Paulo. It's a tough place to go, and it's not an easy place to go. Not many teams go there and get a result. Yeah, that's said and done. I just thought the performance might sort of creep in the mind of the manager there.
Especially the football he likes to play as well. Yeah. It's like they call it heavy metal football.
That's right, yeah.
So if you can't keep up with that, and I think he made a couple of silly decisions, like for example against Chelsea, to get back in the game when they were losing 1-0. I know Daniel Sturridge scored that wonder goal, but to get back in the game, he brought Shaqiri on, in the last sort of 20 minutes. And I don't think he's sort of chucking him in the deep end. Here, go and get a goal against Chelsea, other title contenders. So I just think a couple of the things he's done, I'm not sure this season. I'm not sure if they're going to have that organisation that Man City and Chelsea will have.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and we shall see. And now we Man United versus Newcastle United, and what's really interesting about this, and not since 1999 have United gone a sequence of 5 winless games. The last win they've had this season was in the Champions League against Young Boys Bern 3-0. Newcastle are winless this season too, although I don't suspect there's as much pressure on Benitez.
No.
For obvious reasons. In the transfer market, they've lost all the players and not managed to sign other players. Now, United, they haven't really been, in all fairness, at the top for a few years now. Since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, they've sort of struggled. I think Mourinho did well in his first season. I think that all the criticism aside, he did well. He won trophies. He got him back in the Champions League. He did what he was meant to do. I think last year, it's almost like City's the straw man, so to speak, because the success of the neighbour
And I think the extra pressure on United to try and keep up. But I think bearing in mind the league is a different place to what it used to be years ago. Years ago, you didn't have, obviously, the City didn't have that sort of money. You didn't have the likes of Chelsea investment. It was pretty much Arsenal versus United, and Chelsea come along, the Chelsea revolution with the Abramovich money behind them, City as well. And that makes it tough. And I don't think United will probably get back to, as long as City has that investment and Chelsea to the heights they were. Obviously, they're a big club and one of the biggest clubs in the world, and they want to be winning things. But I think for me, Mourinho is under pressure. He knew that before he took the job on. And I'm going to go for United's win. I think United will win the game, just 1-0. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it was interesting what you said before as well, along the lines of, whether or not United will get back to that soon, get back to what they were. And I think, for me, it's controversial, but for me, one of the issues why they're not doing it is because, they're getting managers and then they're getting rid of managers and they're making hasty decisions. And, okay, I know this hasn't been great this season, and I'm all with the people criticising Mourinho. The results haven't been good. But I think to stick with him would be better than just getting rid of him, bringing in a lacklustre replacement and then getting rid of them in a couple of years as well. So whilst they haven't found someone, stick with one person and see what happens. And what's the worst that can happen? And I think for this result, it's huge because Mourinho and Old Trafford are both a ground and a place, a ground and a person that have a great record against Newcastle. So if they lose, it'll be huge, I think, for the mentality of everyone involved. So I'm going to say it's going to be a 1-1 draw, that one, though.
That's an interesting one, and I think that that sort of takes us to the story of the week. And there's been some rumblings and nothing concrete, nothing firm, but there's been plenty of rumblings about Mourinho this week. If they lose, it looks like he might be showed the door. I agree to a point. I think that you need consistency, and I think that it's really important. It's ironic, really, in the first few seasons, Alex Ferguson struggled and they sort of kept with him and he went on to do some great things. I don't think that time is in the game anymore. I think football, from a business point of view, it's changed considerably. There's a lot of money in the game and teams expect results. And I think for me, there's a lot of pressure on Mourinho. And, I mean, there is that sort of third season syndrome they talk about. But Mourinho's record speaks for itself. He has won and he's been successful. I would say Mourinho is one of the most successful managers of his generation. We can't take that away from him. I think so far he's done what's been asked to do. I think that part of the pressure is based on City being up there, which is obviously down to finances. Let's sort of call a spade there. But equally, football clubs these days, there is that business element. And, we heard the news before about Juventus shares was in the news something like 10%. Yeah, precisely. And that's for other reasons that we shan't go into, which was on the news. But we know that performances can affect shares. We know that these things are multifactorial. And I think for me, there's been a lot of talk about Zidane coming in. Now, what can Zidane do different?
From a business point of view, as you said, with bringing people back, because I know they were sending out text messages, Manchester United, the day before the Champions League match against Valencia, because they hadn't sold out Old Trafford yet, which is wow, growing up the way, in the era that I grew up with Ronaldo at Man United and stuff, that would never happen. They'd never not have sold out all the tickets and stuff. So from a point of view of getting people back and getting people on side, I think Zidane, in the short term, is a solution because, it's a huge name and he won the Champions League with Real Madrid. But the thing about Zidane is, in the league itself, Real Madrid finished 17 points behind Barcelona. They finished third. And Manchester United right now is such a hard club. It will be such a hard club to take over. You're going to need someone with experience, someone who can handle criticism if it doesn't go right straight away. And I just don't feel like Zidane would be the right replacement.
It's an interesting point. I think Zidane's record speaks for itself as a player. He was a phenomenal player, one of the best of his generation. He'd won everything there was pretty much to win as a player. Internationally as well, for France too. As a manager, he's won 3 Champions Leagues. I mean, one could argue that he's got the resource and the players, but then he's still got to win it. There's still a lot of good teams out there, and he's sort of done really well. He's never managed or in the Premier League, and I think that's the tricky thing is that how will you adapt to the Premiership? It's a different style of football over here. He's going to get thrust into the Premier League. There's a lot of pressure, and I think it could go either way, certainly. But equally in saying that, do they sort of carry on from Mourinho? Do they sort of, how far do you go? That's the whole point. It's like
And if they get Zidane sort of around this time in the season, that could make it even more difficult for Zidane because he's been chucked in right at the deep end. They're so far behind now. I don't think there's a chance now that they'll even contend for the title.
Yeah.
And the fans haven't got that patience that they maybe had a few years ago. They haven't got that anymore because we're talking 6 years since they were at the top of the table. So that's a long time for Manchester United with those expectations. So I don't know whether they should hold on with Mourinho. I'm not sure what they should do, to be fair.
Yeah, no, I think it's a tough decision either way, and I think that if Mourinho were to go, then it gives, and that's obviously the name Zidane's been branded about. We don't know if he wants the job. We don't know what the situation is there. But let's say someone like Zidane did take the position, one could make the point that he's got time to put his own mark on it for next season. I think this season, the champion winning the league is out of the question. I think they're too far behind, even at this early stage. So I think it would be all about building for next season. But equally, then there's no guarantee he's going to be able to put a side together. The one thing I would say, in my opinion, Zidane, I think that he would get the best out of the French contingent. I think that it's obvious that there seems to be a bit of friction between Pogba and Mourinho, by all accounts. Pogba's a phenomenal player. Let's make no two ways about it. Juventus was phenomenal. He was phenomenal for France in the World Cup. I think if he gets playing again, then they have every chance to push up the league. I sort of I sit on the fence on that one too. I think it's a tricky one. I would think personally maybe it might be worth sort of keeping Mourinho for the time being, see what happens. There's no two ways about it. He's a successful manager. He's a winner. He knows how to win things. His record definitely is one of the best in the business. But obviously you can't dine on yesterday. And, it's whether Zidane, no Premiership experience, do you sort of keep going around in circles? That's the key element. But we'll sort of watch this space. There's no guarantees. Just the rumblings really around the footballing world suggesting that there's a possibility that if Mourinho loses this weekend, that he could be on the way up. But we shall wait and see.
This is 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio. Your city, your station.
And that was the Premiership review on the weekly sports show with myself, Jimmy Petruzzi, on 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio, with my guest, Stunt Pegg.
Hey.
YouTube extraordinaire. So we're going to talk about the team in Salford at the moment, Salford City. Now, it was quite fascinating, really. The class of 92 invested in the team, and I believe that the major investor is Peter Lim as well. And they've sort of worked their way up the league. They're top of the table at the moment. They're playing some good football. They've got Dover tomorrow, who are second from bottom. You expect Salford to get a result there, albeit in that league. You just never know what can happen. The way the vibe I get with this is sort of kind of divided. There is the one, I wouldn't say there's a huge proportion of people, not at least in this area, but generally speaking in the non-league world, some of them are against leagues having that sort of investment. There are this fan that would say that they're buying their way up the league. We know that money is really important. I personally am involved in non-league at the moment with Bake Up, and it's not easy down there. I mean, the manager of Bake Up, Brent Peters, does a fantastic job. It's tough. It's really, really hard in that league. Let's not make two ways about it. And investment is always welcome in that respect. But obviously this investment is very significant, and you're going to get the sort of contingent of people that think, this is not good from a non-league point of view because disparity. I think in one sense it is, in one sense it isn't. What are some of your thoughts in terms of the likes of Salford, the investment, the way they're sort of working their way up the league? And
I think we're at that point now where it's pretty much the only way to get yourself, establish yourself and get into the actual professional league. You know, if they want to get into League Two and they want to play professional football in that respect, money is just, it's how to get there. It's become impossible, you know, to keep it without money. And I think people that criticise it, it's almost like it's like, you know, as a laugh and stuff, you criticise teams with all the money. Like, for example, I'm a Bolton fan and I always criticise teams with loads of money, like Leeds in the Championship and stuff. But at the end of the day, if Bolton had that money, I wouldn't be complaining. So it's more just, I think it's difficult, and it's like, why do they deserve it more than them? But they got the investment and people wanted to be involved in that team. And I think they deserve it at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point you make, and I think certainly the class 92, the football's in their blood, and you know, they love the area. They are passionate about football. They're passionate about the area. That there's no two ways about that. And you know, we see the reflection on ticket prices. I believe it's £10 for an adult to go to a National League game, which is good going for an adult to go there. So, you know, you can see the argument from people in non-league world, like you said, who don't have that investment. We've seen teams like Fleetwood with investment, Crawley with investment. We've seen certain teams who've had investments gone horribly wrong too, because let's say one day the class of 92 or Peter Lim get out of bed and think, you know what, I'll look somewhere else. So there is that.
Yeah, interesting you should say that, because there's a team, you know, league below, you know, down south called Billericay Town, and their owner brought quite a lot of money. They have loads of money. They signed players that people thought, hang on a second, these are players that could be in League One and League Two, but because of money and wages that these non-league clubs could offer, like Billericay Town, they decided to go there. And so people were saying, is that unfair? But then there's been their owner, it's been really like sort of controversial, and all of a sudden they're losing all that money. So it's a dangerous game, really. Like, you could say it's quite worrying for some fans, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like, you know, the ride. It's like, enjoy the ride to a point.
Yeah.
And it's one of them, really. I think that, you know, we've seen the likes of Burton and Yeovil move up the league, and they, by all accounts, in my understanding, didn't have that sort of investment in that respect. That sort of took them time and to grow organically. So it can be done in that way too, but it can take a lot longer to do it that way. But certainly the infrastructure, and I don't know a great deal about the infrastructure and what the class of 92 are planning to do. It'd be great to have them on board the show at some point, and you know, I wish them all the best. I think it's an exciting venture for them, and they are very present at the games, and they do get behind the team, so they have a strong physical presence in the game too. I can see him progressing. Certainly, I think that they'll certainly, as long as they're around, going to keep working their way up in the game. Whether they get to league football or not is anybody's guess. And when you do get to league football, it's not easy to stay as well. I think that, you know, they're under no illusions, that's for sure too. I'm sure they know the game well enough to know that you get to league football, it's very competitive, that's for sure. So we'll sort of watch this space where that's concerned with interest. Now, you cover the Bolton games with your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Are you going to a game this weekend? Is it?
Yeah, it's a big one, definitely. Bolton versus Blackburn on TV tomorrow 5:30. Definitely nervous for it after Tuesday's performance. We played Stoke and lost 2-0, and we had one shot on target in the whole match. And, you know, I'm still optimistic about it myself. I think we'll do really well. I've got a feeling that we're going to win this at home as well. So our last home match, we obviously won that game against Derby. So I'm looking forward to it, but it's going to be a huge test for the players, this one.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, you know, it's always a tough game, irrespective of, you know, which league is playing and what level. It's a massive game for both teams, for sure. Massive game for both teams. And in terms of Bolton, where do you think they can realistically finish this season, what you've seen so far?
You see, we're one of those clubs that I think I would take just not being relegated. So, you know, it's one of those, and I think we could potentially finish higher than that, maybe sort of around the 17th, 18th point. I think we will dip inside that relegation zone a couple of times this season, but I think we've got better players this season. The only concern I've got is this sort of animosity between the fans and the owner. So, you know, I hope that plays out well. But yeah, I think we'll be safe.
Yeah, an interesting view. So It's been a pleasure.